father's health.
Okay, good.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Hey, 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 hey. Like, share, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Hey, hey. Is that Robert? That's right. Shalom. Robert Williams. Shalom. Sending you so much love. Yep, yep, yep. Like and share, like and share, like and share. You know, I'm bumping into people. My Aunt Julie and my Uncle Tony live in New Mexico. And she watches this show every day. Oh, I said, Mom, Julie. But so I don't see her here, but but maybe that's why we rack up millions of views after about a month or so, which is really a wonderful thing. It's so thank you all for that, and I hope that this is in service of what it is that you need. We're going to do a deeper dive on the the U.S. ambassador to South Africa, and from yet another perspective. It's a story that is underreported, and I want us to talk about that. So everybody like and share, like and share, like and share, like and share. And I'm going to come up in 15 seconds. Okay. So everybody, please like and share and go to the Santita Jackson uh, Show YouTube channel, Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, Santita Jackson and Friends on Facebook, at Santita J on X, and all of that. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a pleasure, a blessing to be with you today. We're going to do a bit of a deeper dive on the administration's ambassadorial pick to go to South Africa. I'm going to start again. One, two, three. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a blessing to be with you today. We're going to do a deeper dive, yes, on the administration's ambassadorial pick to represent the United States in South Africa. He said some really interesting things, and I wanted to get yet another perspective on this because it's a story that's underreported. It seems that it's open season on Black people. You can say anything about Black people and it's okay. But other groups, it's not okay. And his views on Black Americans and on Black people, it's not okay. And it's something that we need to be made aware of. Hey, Carol, my sister from another mister out there in the hills of Beverly, sending you so much love, my sister. So as we begin, of course, we are with James Early. He's becoming a regular on the show, and I love that, of course. And he's battling a bit of a virus today, but he is with us today, the former Assistant Secretary for Public Service and Education at the Smithsonian. But he's also been a long-time activist on Afro Latino, and Afro was, I should say, Afro Latin and Afro Caribbean, and really diasporic issues with respect to Africans and really with respect to the world. It gives you the perspective from this space. And so I always want to pivot to him to ask him about issues like this. But before I begin, I wanted to give you an update on my father, on Reverend Jesse Jackson. Many people over the weekend have been speculating about his health, and then there was an unsettling report for a lot of people. And because I've been working and I've not been paying attention to the news the way many people do, I missed the report that he had been on life support. Nothing could have been further from the truth. My father is 84 years of age. He does have a form of Parkinson's. When I took him to the Mayo Clinic in April, the doctors were pleased that I talked about Parkinsonism, because Parkinsonism is really the umbrella for a group of different diseases that are Parkinson's diseases. Most Parkinson's diseases that we know of present themselves with tremors. But there's a whole range of diseases. It just so happens that he got the most progressive and severe form of it. And he has outlived his prognosis by about a decade. And he continues to fight back. So when we took him to the hospital last week, he had a severe infection. And so his body was fighting on many different fronts. And then on Friday night, he took a turn for the better. As part of this infection, dropped his blood pressure. And they had to give him medications to keep his blood pressure boosted. And then late in the evening on Friday, we noticed that his blood pressure shot up. I said, "Oh, wait a minute. I think something's happened here." And it turns out they decreased his medication significantly by more than half. And then they took him off the next day. He no longer needed the support. So he was not on a form of life support. In fact, he was getting another kind of support to help him get through this infection. And he is really on the other side of it. And so I want to thank you for your prayers, because I can tell you that the prayers of the righteous do availeth much. And something came to me about 3 a.m. on Saturday morning that gave me so much strength. And it's Jesus talking in the Gospels of Mark and Matthew, in which he says that you know not the day nor the hour, nor the angels, nor the Son, referring to himself, but only God. Only God puts the timestamp on you. So, whatever you're going through, I want you to know that only God has the final word. So, when you are in the hospital or when you are facing a challenge, you can challenge your doctors. All they can do is give you what they see, but you need to ask God what God sees and go with that. And that is what we've done. And we have been so blessed. And we've been blessed by your prayers. And I want to thank you on behalf of my mother and my family for all of the love that you have shown us. People in the monks in New Mexico have gotten together and they are praying for him 24/7. I mean, it's just things like that. As we walk through the hospital, people pushing the brooms. Let Reverend know we're praying for him. Oh, that's everything. And what we want to do is continue to fight for people to get the kind of health care that he's getting. That's really the fight. I'll tell you what, the Republicans do have this right. Even ACA is a payoff to the insurance industry. We need Medicare for all, period. From prenatal to grave. That's it. I don't care how much money you make. I don't care if you have no money. If you are sick, you need to be able to get well. That's it. Everybody should have access to a clinic like Mayo or Cleveland or Northwestern Hospital or Rush or whatever. Whatever of the best hospitals, our county hospitals ought to be the best in the world. So that's the fight. And we are still on it. And he gave us instructions yesterday that he wanted 2,000 bags of groceries to go out immediately because people need food. So he's still doing the work. And his eyes are open, he's talking, and he said, "I'm ready to go home," because he's ready to go to work. And you know what? I'm, yes, what you say, Reverend, he just doesn't stop. And you know he's not going to stop. So let's pivot to something that he talked about. You know, when he ran for president, I mean, he's not alone, but he used that elevated platform to highlight apartheid in South Africa, as you remember, Mr. Early. He made that central to his campaign, as he did make he made the appeal for the Palestinians. He said Israeli security, but Palestinian justice. No one had done that. We had a no talk policy. And even the Democrats called it the P word because no one dare mention Palestinians. They were a group that you didn't talk about. Well, no, he did that. And he took the heat for it, took the hit. But it was the right thing to do. And so here we are. It just seems that these free thinking South African Black people are a problem. So as they reach out to fight for the people of Gaza, this nominee says that he's going to stand 10 toes down against South Africa over the Gazan genocide. Now, South Africa does not have to accept his credentials, but it's very, very interesting. But he did some other things that were very interesting. Senator Murphy, Chris Murphy from Connecticut, asked him some interesting questions, Mr. Early, about Black rights. equality, voting. And I want you to help me to understand what we are looking at because L. Brent Bozell III is known to be an extreme right winger. I'm not going to call him a conservative, but an extreme right winger and someone who holds views that are quite frankly racist. No one's talking about it. I mean, he had a full Senate hearing and there's no discussion. And he could win on a party line vote. So, welcome to the show. Thank you for as you fight this this flu. Thank you for getting up and speaking to us today because I really felt that I wanted you to address this. Just given your expertise, Mr.
Well,
Early.
it is very good to be back with you. And let me just first say that I and millions, not only across this country but around the world, are so thankful that the social Reverend Jesse Jackson is still connected to us. And I stress the social Reverend Jesse Jackson because of his extraordinary skills and articulation and organizing, for which you had pointed out it was really Martin Luther King's look at him was as a major organizer.
Mhm.
His extraordinary individual figure, I think, has perhaps limited our understanding of the impactful social being that he has always been defined by his giving, not just by his standing up as an individual. And so to hear that even as he lay in bed, struggling with this virus and with a very serious disease, he still speaks to us, for us, with us. And the 2000 grocery index is just so characteristic of who he was. On this nomination, I am not surprised, and I don't think we should be surprised that in addition to this man having an individual track record as basically a racist, that he is now articulating, as he continued to say in his responses to the congressional hearing, that I am carrying out the charges of President Donald Trump. And of course, the attack of Donald Trump on concentrating the legislative, the judicial, democratic attack on liberal democracy into the White House, surrounded openly by oligarchs, um, is has been characteristically racialized. The first thrust was against immigrants, and then, of course, the attack on the National African American Museum as the frontal attack on the Smithsonian Institution, the attack on DEI as the broader racialized context, including on women. So we have a double issue here of one, an individual who has his own individual track record of racism, and then he has the track record of carrying out this authoritarian racialized attack, both here in the US and abroad. As I pointed out in one of our last conversations, Donald Trump's last visit to the UN was to warn Europe about these immigrants spoiling Europe, these read colored people who were from the colonies, from India, from Africa, from the Caribbean, from Latin America. So I think this is the broader context. Uh, I think it's interesting and somewhat curious that U.S. congressional representatives, particularly on the Democratic side, ask him about his perspectives about African American rights, whether African Americans should have full citizenship, in effect, whether this should be a white supremacist country. In many ways, we already knew where he would stand on such a question, and I'm just wondering um, why they would raise that rather than to go solely at his perspectives on attacking South Africa for standing up against apartheid in Gaza, for which now we have 30, 40 years of South Africans, even during the time they were under apartheid, saying that what they had experienced and observed firsthand um, around the Palestinians, around Israeli occupation, was worse than anything that they had ever experienced in South African apartheid. And you are right. There are many sides to this coin. It's There is the individual, there is the Donald Trump administration with MAGA backing, but there is also the centrist Democratic Party, but then there are also the South Africans.
But
President
let me.
Ramaphosa, go
Oh, I'm
ahead.
sorry. But let me
Yep.
ask you this: if we can, before we get to President Ramaphosa and the different sides of this coin, because that really is to me the most apt metaphor for this. No, he was the only Democrat who questioned him, who took that
Right.
tack, and the Democrats did not respond at all. I mean, no one said, "No, sir, you didn't answer the question." No one followed up.
Well, this is so much the pro forma ritual of democracy. Let us have a congressional hearing. That the president cannot do this because he does not have authorization to do X or Y. Those are the procedural dimensions, almost theatrically presented. So rather than the substantive issue, what is the nature of the issue before us? And this is where, when Bozell started to give the responses, that the first thing he would do would be to chastise and to try to force or leverage South Africa to withdraw its international court case about genocide against Israel. This is where Democratic lawmakers should be focused in on, of drawing out what's really behind this issue. This is another racialized inhumanity attack in which large majorities of the world's population, including a number of countries, including in Europe, have come to the proposition that what we're witnessing is a genocide. But no, they back off of this. This is so characteristic of a moribund centrist leadership in the Democratic Party. I say leadership, I emphasize leadership. I'm not talking about the broad, diverse, multi-class, multiracial voting base, which is a whole nother question that somewhere in our discussions, I'm sure I will come back to as what the lever of how we should really try to leverage all of this from the point of view of citizens. But yes, now with Ramaphosa, President Ramaphosa, he has an opportunity not to accept the credentials of Bozell as ambassador, and he would simply be a charge of affairs, and which means that he is not getting full engagement as other ambassadors. So I think that's something that we also have to look at and to raise, especially in light of the embarrassing display of Donald Trump in really attacking President Ramaphosa when they met previously in the White House. And it seemed that President Ramaphosa, who is a very adroit political
Mhm.
person, a former head of the largest trade union in South Africa, a former member of the Communist Party in South Africa, which played such an instrumental role, including intersection with President Nelson Mandela in defeating apartheid in South Africa. So while we focus on our responsibility here directly with regard to the representatives of the United States government, uh, as global citizens, and particularly here in the United States, where we played such a significant role in complementing the African National Congress's own struggle to overturn apartheid, we should be expecting and we should be petitioning, I think, President Ramaphosa not to accept these credentials as ambassador.
Well, to help me to understand that process, when you say that if you, the charge d'affaires, you are not empowered to fully engage with the government, what does that mean?
That means that the government of South Africa would not extend basic protocol courtesies and or substantive engagement on matters of international affairs uh, in a regular kind of way with this representative of the United States. And they would pick and choose when they want to deal directly with this representative of the United States, which means, in effect, when they want to deal with the United States, because he is not just an individual. As he said, as he consistently said in his congressional responses, that he is representing the charges of the president of the United States, Donald Trump. And so that we should not just focus on Bozell, the individual person. As he himself said, his individual beliefs are really secondary to his role, his acceptance of the charge of the highest representative of the government of the United States. So that's what it means is that South Africa would take somewhat of at least a half measure step back and not continue to, in my view, conciliate the disrespect and the attack that this man is going to carry out. Because the other issue that Bozell pointed out in his exchanges was the fiction that white South Africans, that Afrikaners, are under terrorist attacks on the part of South Africans aided by the South African government. This is just a blatant lie that even major Afrikaners who are patriots, who are still in the country, who
Mhm.
operate within the context of the Constitution, have come forward to say this is a blatant lie. And so that I think Ramaphosa has to step forward. We're seeing in other areas, and we will get to that further down a course of our discussion, that representatives really throughout the world, including in Europe, are now beginning to distance themselves in different ways from this rogue government and the attempts to break all protocols and that might is right. So I think this is a context that particularly those of us, not just African Americans who were at the forefront of this, but also many, many white Americans, Jewish Americans, Latino Americans, Native
Mhm.
Americans, who were active voices and active petitioners in the struggle against apartheid in South Africa, that we need to say to President Ramaphosa that we do not accept this kind of representation on the part of the United States government in our name. Um,
Well, help me to understand this. Uh, he has been very forward in his uh, pushback on South Africa's support of the Palestinians, their stand on genocide. Help me to understand why this is central to his nomination, or should I say, to his mission. He feels that his mission, when he goes there, um, is to is to make South Africa pay.
well, he says straightforwardly that this is his charge from the Trump administration. So he is not making personal, individualized decisions. He is
Mhm.
representing the reigning government of the United States of America, which has a position of fighting South Africans who have been the lead, the global lead in raising with the international court the issue of genocide against the Palestinians and holding them responsible. Donald Trump has tried to undermine that at every way. A part of Bozell's response in his testimony was that he will be saying that there is a ceasefire in place. There is not a ceasefire in place. That is a fiction. This so-called agreement is contrasted with daily. We're seeing Palestinians continuously shot down. We're seeing the extension of the government of Israel going into surrounding countries as far away as Syria. And so that we have to call to question, we have to step outside of the narratives that they're giving at us and believe what we're seeing with our own eyes and what we're hearing with our own ears and call a spade a spade. And we've been so socialized to respond to the narratives, whether it be of the far right MAGA Trump movement, or whether it's more the liberal Democratic centrist leadership, to be responsive to their narratives, rather than we, the citizens. We are the foundation of democracy. It's the citizens wherever who are the fundaments, the demos, the ordinary people, the kwasha, the power of ordinary people, as I am so want to always bring up, that it is, and it's our responsibility to step forward and to draw the curtain back and say, no, you are not on a reflective narrative of what is actually going on.
Why would this particular issue be central? I mean, It seems like the world was put back on its heels a bit when South Africa took up the mantle here. Was it because you had this African power taking on empire, taking on the West? Was there a little bit of that? Um, is this still the third rail in American politics? Um, critique of misdeeds by the Israeli government, not of Jews. This has nothing to do with
No,
Judaism. In
nothing to
fact,
do with Judaism.
this has
Yeah.
none, they have
Yeah.
nothing to do with Judaism. This
Yeah.
is something else. And I think it's important for us to really emphasize that, Mr. Early, because a lot of our Jewish brothers and sisters, well, all of them, whether you agree with them politically or not, they're taking hits on this because the tide has changed. The tide has turned globally,
Well,
right?
the tide has indeed changed, and I don't think this is any longer the third rail. We have seen Democratic centrist and liberal congressional people backing away from APAC funding. We've seen in the city with the world's largest population of Jews, New York City, overwhelmingly vote for a democratic socialist policy, domestic policy, and only in regard to international policy with stepping away openly from the Zionist apartheid and the genocide that is going on. It does not mean that they're stepping away from Israel, that we should not overread the narrative. But their votes have decidedly said, we do not agree with this genocidal policy. And so that it is no longer the third rail. But I think this is a broader issue that we're seeing. Uh, what the Trump administration, through Steve Bannon, who is a key element of the MAGA social movement, and I want to underscore that MAGA has two dimensions. Make America Great Again has two dimensions. One is the citizenry. Again, as I said, it is the foundational element of any democracy, whether it's under capitalism, socialism, whatever the construct, it is the citizen. The MAGA social movement, which has voted in the MAGA blue state movement and the MAGA judicial elements and the MAGA federal and presidential element. What Steve Bannon, as a key strategist, he may be in the social movement the most significant strategist, was very, very clear in putting forward the quote unquote dismantling of liberal democracy. And we have seen them move on that. What we did not know at that time was the deep 2025 report, whatever that report is called,
Project
uh,
2025.
20 Project 2025 of the Heritage Foundation. That is a multi-decade analysis of how to, in local, state judicial and congressional representation and the White House and cultural institutions and the media and the deployment of the military to take over state governance power in totality. This is not just we want to have a numerical majority in the House or the Senate, or we want to have the president. We want state power in a new kind of construct. And so that what we're seeing with regard to the issue of Israel and Palestinians is part and parcel and calibrated different ways of a larger narrative of state power that's being put into place. And so that the use of Bozell as their hopeful ambassador to South Africa is part of this larger context. One of the other questions that we, the progressive citizenry, and I include liberals in that context and progressives of all kinds of ideological political stripes and across classes and races, is what will the Democratic senators say? We have seen in so many cases that under Schumer, judicial appointments on the part of the MAGA Trump administration have been almost routinely approved. Why is the question? Because they're operating out of a context of an old context that no longer exists of bipartisanism. And notwithstanding the fact that we are now seeing some cracks, not yet a full divide among, particularly around the Epstein files, um, we don't have any indication that Fetterman, for example, in the Senate, is going to stand away from approving somewhat like Bozell. What will Schumer's position be on Bozell? What will Booker's position from New Jersey be on Bozell? We have to draw the curtain back on all of this because the names that I've just mentioned, who are part of the centrist Democratic Party leadership, have too often conciliated on particular points like judges or ambassadors on this, and have been openly hostile to the voters, not to just the candidates, but to the voter shift, uh, not only in the Democratic Party base. This is not a bunch of communists and socialists who voted Mamdani in, or the people who are coming in Michigan or out in Seattle, which are not to be confused with the votes in Virginia, which all come under the rubric of the Democratic Party. But these are different trends, if you will, or different orientations under that rubric of the Democratic Party. And so we have to put pressure not only on the right wing, on the MAGA folk, and on people like Bozell, but we also have to put pressure on the people who have been voted in to carry out a more liberal, progressive agenda. In many instances, which they are failing on, and we're seeing the voter shift. It's a kind of stream, as I like to call it, as a metaphor. It's not yet a wave. And so we have to be careful in overcalculating it. But clearly, we are seeing a shift of frustration, disappointment, in some instances, condemnation, as we've just seen with regard to Schumer in folding and orchestrating, as I would say it, the folding. Although he voted no, we now know that he was involved in every step of the process. So this is a way to keep his leadership because he conciliated to the 8 safe seats uh, who were so this is the broader context in which I think we need to see Bozell beyond his own personal discriminatory views, but in the context of a larger move of dismantling liberal democracy, which means dismantling the structures of liberal democracy. And I'll just transition on this point. A key structure that we have to recognize that was dismantled in this movement, we saw it, the germ of it, with the Tea Party, in what was the traditional Republican Party, the more traditional bipartisan Democrat Republican way of handling the competition for who would manage overall state government. We saw that party, that construction of the Republican Party, totally destroyed and now revised into this MAGA movement, which is concentrated in the executive White House.
We are
Excuse me.
talking, God bless you, with James Early, who has gotten out of bed to help us today to understand not just who this ambassadorial pick from the administration is to South Africa, um, to help us to understand the broader context in which this nomination has been put forward, right, Mr. Early? Because I think that because everything does have context. And so help me to understand, or help us all to understand, South Africa's importance. I mean, why is South Africa significant to the United States and really and on the continent? I mean, because most of us have not been there. You know, a lot of us won't get there. But when you get to South Africa, I think you, because it is so westernized, you see the wealth and you say, "Oh, I now see
Yes.
why these people were not going to leave." What did Jennifer Holliday sing? And I'm telling you, I'm
Yeah.
not going. Because, and of course, Jennifer Holliday did that as well. But the first person I saw say that on Broadway, Jennifer Holliday, so that just kind of stuck in my mind. But when you get there, you see, oh, the wealth. And these people say, wait a minute, I've been here 100, 200, 300, 400 years. I'm not leaving this. Are you
Right.
kidding me? I know
Right.
what awaits me in England. I know what awaits me in Belgium. And it's not.
No, it's an extraordinary geography. I mean, just a beautiful geography of multi-climatic dimensions. It is a very highly developed industrial society, trade unions and working class and natural resources, um, um, which really enveloped the whole Southern African region because miners from all of the border states came to work in South Africa. I had the wonderful opportunity and pleasure for a number of years in my work at the Smithsonian Institution through my role then as Director of Cultural Heritage Policy at the Center for Folklife to be involved in a folklife festival on the National Mall, South Africa, crafting the economic something of the rainbow. I forget the exact title, but working with traditional weavers and song makers and jewelry makers from grassroots communities. And so I travel the entire country. Um, South Africa is the second largest economy on the continent of Africa. Nigeria is the largest. My speculation, and I want to underscore my speculation because I'm not an economist, is that South Africa is the more organized economy, the more efficient economy. And one of the things that is seldom, if ever, really talked about is that white South African industrialist corporations in particular, post-apartheid, and perhaps even before the end of apartheid, but certainly post-apartheid, began to also extend their operations northward, all the way up to Nigeria. So they control, they influence, from an economic point of view, a lot of Africa, not just within the borders of South Africa. And of course, that is a major seaway because they're at the South Africa is at the bottom of the continent, coming out of the east from Malaysia, India, coming around, coming up, going into South America, coming up north towards Europe. And so this is the significance, but also they hold the banner of anti-colonial liberation. They fought the longest and the hardest battle, and they took on the most restrictive racialized society in the Africana control. And of course, that was all embodied in the extraordinary figure whom I never met of Nelson Mandela, although I saw him at a reception, I never really met him. My buddy Danny Glover talks about him all the time and those experiences that they had. And so I think here is the significance of South Africa. And then in the personhood of Mbeki, who followed Mandela, Mbeki, who studied at the Lenin School in Russia, was once a member of the Communist Party. And I want to underscore this because these terms tend to scare us. The Red Scare in the United States is scared. But these are people who were fighting for basic humanity. And these were the banners that stepped forward, as did the Communist Party in the United States in the 30s and the 40s, stepping forth against lynching and organizing in places like Birmingham. And one can have one, if one is going to have a prejudice, one should investigate exactly why do I have this prejudice. So this is a context in which you've got leaders like Mbeki, and then you have the kleptomaniac whose name I'm probably trying to forget. I can't recall who followed Mbeki, whose house
I'm trying to remember.
trying to recall his
Because I
name as
think
well.
I
Uh,
think you do. I think you do. I drew a blank.
Yeah, I drew. In fact, my wife and I dined in his home, and so I met him on a few occasions, and and uh, and then Ramaphosa. All of these people came out of the left wing of the multi-ideological faceted so movement against apartheid in South Africa. So they were the concentrated point of view of the entire globe fighting for a new humanity. Literally everybody around the world, Europe, Australia, across Latin America, of course, throughout the United States, stood forward in the anti-apartheid movement. It was the focal point of the uplift of global humanity, that fight against an obvious inhuman kind of context. And so this is part of the validation that South Africa still carries, notwithstanding the fact that so much of what the African National Congress in that epoch stood for and that the world supported has not come to be, and that the African National Congress has split in many different ideological and political ways of not delivering. And of course, an elite Black class, including President Ramaphosa himself, who is a billionaire
Mhm.
by his own statement, not that I don't mean that as an accusation, who
Mhm.
arose, and there is a lot of wealth and a lot of Black people arose. I've been to those flower farms that Black people bought, and I recalling calling to my wife once from I was on the coast just maybe 25 miles or so outside of Cape Town. And I forget the name of the little place where the whales and dolphins in the small little town,
Oh my
and two
goodness.
and 2 blocks off the waterfront. I saw this house for like $200,000. I called my wife and I said, we could probably get a loan. And of course, her response was, "And so, how often are we going to go there?" And and of course, I was dreaming because that was a real question. But it was a sign of how the depreciation of value in a very well-developed country in post-apartheid, and how Black South Africans and people, including from Zimbabwe, who
Mhm.
came in and bought up bunches of property there. So it is a very rich country. It has a very rich history of the fight for democracy. And Donald Trump's attack on them is a very politicized attack because they dared to challenge the global society, not only the United States, but Europe, in charging genocide and carrying out a legacy that they had held for decades. Ramaphosa didn't just come up on this out of nowhere. When he, as a trade unionist and all, they were very much involved in the support of Palestinians because they understood that this was worse, and they articulated that publicly all around the world. It was worse than anything under apartheid that they had faced.
Mm. Where do you see this nomination going? I mean, on a party line vote, it seems that he could win. And I don't see any Democrats. No one's even brought this up.
Right, right. No one has even brought it up. My suspicion is that he will be nominated.
That the
And
nomination will go through.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. The nomination
Mhm.
will go through. That would be my guess. Um, it's hard to imagine, given the character, certainly on the part of the Democratic Party, that they're going to fall on their swords over this. Um,
Should
they
they?
had shown. I'm sorry.
Should they?
They might. I'm doubtful. I'm hopeful, but doubtful.
No, I'm just
And
I'm asking this really in the domestic context.
yes,
The
in the
United
domestic
States.
context, I'm doubtful. My doubts outweigh my hopes here.
Well, no,
Uh,
not should not will they, but given the fact that the backbone of the party is still the black vote.
it
That was
is.
always right. Because I see people, at this point in my father's life, they say he did this for the Democratic Party. No, he ran for America. We have always had a tortured relationship with both parties. And if you study him, and Abby Phillips' book really does talk about this, Republicans came for him. He said
Yes.
they offered him a lot of money. He said, "No, I will lose my independence, and that's not what I'm trying to do. I'll work this out." But he was not hostile to Republicans. And we grew up in Chicago. You understand. I grew up in Chicago. He was working here. Dr. King was run out of Chicago, and had to work here
The
because
worst violence that
my
Dr. King faced outside of St. Augustine,
he
Chicago,
said,
Cairo.
these are the meanest people I've ever seen in my life.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's Chicago. I grew up in a city. Chicago's a city where the mayors lived in a restricted neighborhood. Every mayor up until her, and they grew up in Bridgeport. That is
Right.
restricted. That was a restricted community. Every mayor until Harold Washington. That's all the mayors in my young life were there. You did not even go there as a black person until the 80s. So wait, no, this was about democracy. This was about the republic. We had young black Republicans for Jesse Jackson because black people, not 20 years after the Voting Rights Act, did not have the political traction.
Right.
And
Right.
this and the perspective, as Reverend said, I'm a black candidate for sure, but this is not a black campaign. It's an American campaign from a black perspective.
It's a
From
rainbow.
it's
Through the
rainbow.
particularity of the Black experience, sees a universal humanity, and we do that by starting with our humanity. And
Mhm.
this is another part of the contribution that he made, that traditional political reviews and theories and whatnot don't really pick up what that rainbow banner really meant. Uh, and of course, he was picking up a banner of Martin Luther King. Martin Luther
Mhm.
King
That was his
came
assignment.
out of the Black experience, but he uplifted all of humanity through the sense of his own humanity, and not just adopting, from Carlyle and all of the people that he quoted. And this is a construct that Black Americans don't fully get. I have been recently using the terminology of the sort of Black quota or Black percentage politicians,
Mhm.
who only want to talk about a Black agenda, rather than a national agenda raised by Black people.
Can I
Uh,
can I can I can I insert this here?
yeah,
Congressman Cleo Fields and Congressman Jonathan Jackson initiated the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Caucus in Congress. They purposefully and purposely had white members sign on first. The Black Caucus has a DEI caucus as well, but it's only Black people.
right.
They said that kind of misses the point.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that is not diminishing what the CBC does, because we need the CBC, we do. But DEI is about everybody getting involved in this struggle, right? So I mean, so that's what I'm trying to find out, just where we are right now.
Well,
Because I've got
D.
the Democrats who won't say anything about this nomination,
Right.
and I mean, and you're sitting on the committee, and then you come out, and we're in 2026 already. The only way they're going to win anything is if Black people come out. You got to over-index in the vote. And
But
they
but
won't come.
we have to look at, W. Du Bois in Black Reconstruction laid it out so clearly, as have other documents. We have been the crucible. First of all, we were the essential element in the economic development of this country, which meant that we were also the essential element in the dehumanized legal constructions and principles of us being chattel, of us being less than human, of not being in the Constitution. That has been the test case. We are still the crucible, the test case of American democracy. But so many of our teachers, our leaders, etc., won't claim this, in some ways, understandably, because of the absolutism of Eurocentrism, which is not to be conflated with white supremacy. It intersects, but that what comes from Europe about good, truth, and beautiful is the universal. And yes, there are other cultural expressions, but they are not the universal. That is where the conflict with looking at Eurocentrism, and then it becomes a kind of absolutist perspective. And then white supremacy, which is now being posed again when you have the vice president of the United States saying, "Don't you want to wake up and see people who look like you?" And of course, the contradiction is he wakes up and he sees a woman of the subcontinental Indian descent,
But he
who,
wants her to be
uh,
Christian now. I mean,
right, who
But
apparently
Christianity is
thinks
not.
like him. But
Yeah, I mean, but Christianity is not white. I mean, so I.
right, well, that's another whole construct of who was Jesus, and was he black of skin and Jewish? I mean, that there are a lot of these issues that
Mhm.
of the narrative that we don't want to face, and so I want to be a little circumspect here. We just saw the announcement of a new building in New York City, and it's saying that Black America is in crisis. The country is in crisis,
Mhm.
and the major index of that, in terms of how the country is constructed, is Black America. Now, yes, Native Americans were totally decimated.
Mhm.
This is a historical issue, not one of who is better or who is worse, but what actually happened in the construction of this country
Mhm.
was that it was off of African enslaved labor. It was off of the African mind and inventions of patents and whatnot, because we were
Mhm.
so inserted in the complex, and others were so excluded from the complex of the development of the country, including poor white people. And as I mentioned to you once before, where W.E. Du Bois talked about the psychological wages that poor white people got for being poor, thinking that they were better than the most educated black people. We don't want to own that narrative. So a black agenda has to be not a vertical agenda up against other centric or vertical agendas. It has to be a horizontal contextual agenda of who are the poorest and most denigrated in terms of the popular construct of what it means to be an American. It is premised off of not being black. It is not premised off of not being native. It is not premised off of not being Latino. It is premised off of being a derivative of Africa. And we could go through so many instances in which this is coming out uh, openly in the Trump administration, and being validated by the Supreme Court in redistricting, excluding us from equal access to the ballot box. And yet we have so many black elected representatives who are narrowly, including Hakeem Jeffries, who's saying that representing his black constituents and social justice, of course, he's going to represent that. But no, brother, we need you to represent state power for all of the people. Uh, this is where I think the Mandani outlook is
Mhm.
saying, I'm not just here as a Muslim born in Africa with a name called Kwame. I'm here for all of the humanity in the United States. And I'm going to speak to the international question that the whole world is focused on now. Unfortunately, we are not anywhere nearly focused on what's going on in the Congo or what's going on in Sudan. Haiti is not even talked about. And we have to ask ourselves, where are Black representatives on the total question of power? I've been involved with a group of lawyers around the Smithsonian recently, and one of the comments that I get from some very talented and dedicated people is, well, the Black Caucus is overwhelmed and focused on snaps. No, you got to be focused on the whole systemic issue, not
All
just
the time.
all the time. That's why we sent you there. At least that's what my vote was about. It was not just to talk to quote unquote black people. It was to lead the entire nation. And the burning house metaphor of Dr. King suggests to us that we have to be a central element, not the only element, in the reconstruction of the house, not just giving us equal rooms. And
Mhm.
and too many, most of our legislators are sort of stuck in this. I represent. Where is Reverend Warnock, the Martin Luther King head of the Martin Luther King Church? He comes after me, I think. My
Mhm.
Morehouse brother,
Mhm.
stepping forward on these global humanity issues, who couldn't at a certain point say ceasefire. Now they all say ceasefire, but ceasefire is not going on. So they give us a construct and say, don't look at the day-to-day reality. So this is my concern. And we're seeing a shift, somewhat, as I said before, a stream in voters. I'm talking about mainstream voters now. I'm not
Mhm.
talking about people who share my left ideology or my textbook this or that. And I'm talking about bus drivers and nurses and lawyers and doctors who are crossing party lines and other lines,
Mhm.
saying this system is not functioning. And Bernie Sanders played a really, really important role talking about oligarchs, when many of the pundits of all racial and ethnic backgrounds on MSNBC and other mainstream stations were saying, well, no one ain't wants to hear that term oligarch or know what. But now that term has currency, because the oligarchs are around the White House. They just built a big ballroom. They were just down at Mar-a-Lago eating caviar when they wouldn't pass snaps, and saying, I
For
don't really care
Halloween,
if these people for
the,
Halloween. Yeah,
the
yeah.
Gilded Age party. I was saying,
Yes, yes, yes.
wow, how tone
Yeah,
deaf, Great
yeah.
Gatsby. But I think it was historically consistent. So I can't get that upset about that. I think we have to read between the lines. Before we go, help us understand. I know this is a broad question, but one of the things that I appreciate about you is that you contextualize all of your answers and you give us say, wait a minute now, it's not that simple. But and because this nomination is occurring within a certain context, the oligarchs, Bernie Sanders brought this up because he mentioned the dirty little word that we don't want to talk about in America,
Right, right.
the class struggle.
The
Racism
class
is a
struggle,
form of
right.
class. You know, that's so we need to be mindful of that. What is our takeaway? Because now we need elected leadership who will fight. And I think that people are demanding that. I mean, the last independent president, I was reading, and then I saw this on one of these, I guess one of these wonky specials. I love them. Uh, last independent president we had was George Washington. He shunned parties. He said, "No, I'm not a part. I'm president of the United States. I work
United
for the
States,
people.
right.
That's it." And these parties are going to get you in trouble. They're going to lead to tyranny because what we need are people who are elected to work for the people. I think that when the president's elected, Mr. Early, they should they should lead their party and lead the country. That's it. I mean,
Yes,
just it's and people might say that's a pipe dream. No, the first president of the United States had no. He was not the president from a party. He was the president of the United States. Well,
States, right.
the United States, such as it was at the time. So, I mean, what is our takeaway? Because this nomination and so many things are happening as we're going into an election season, as we're already in it. Mamdani
Yes,
is a metaphor for really for people power. People
yes,
don't people
yes,
understand around the country less what he stands for,
yes,
but he talked about affordability. He went up against the establishment ostensibly, and people won. I think people are excited about the people winning.
yes,
Even more than, and I like him, but it's about more than him. It's about wait a minute, we can do this.
yes. So I think the key thing is, where are we in our actual governance reality? And the principal um, issue is the MAGA Trump government that is taking back all of the accumulated gains of liberties of different sectors of the society that have been accumulated over decades now, with African Americans again being the catalytic element that opened up the mirror of democracy for other people to say, me too, long before the Me Too came along, saying, wow, look what these Black people are demanding. And when I look at it, I actually am only partially in the mirror of having some of that, or I'm not in the mirror at all. And the earnest ones have credited, we looked at what Black people were raising conceptually about liberty and democracy and freedom, and the tactics and the strategies and the organizational modes that they use. And we acknowledge that we too should use that. That is the crucible element of how we have played, of our role in the formation of this democracy.
Mm.
Now, we have some very positive signs in the voting population of Madani. Again, I said something like 63% of Jews in his district voted for him, while Jeffries was silent, while Schumer was silent. They didn't really come out and support him. Jeffries came out and acknowledged him, but they are blind. We need different kinds of leaders because the majority of their voting districts voted for the Mandami platform. They didn't vote for the color of his skin or the nature of his name or his religion. They voted for his platform. They won't come out and stand for universal health care. And while Obamacare was a major Democratic step above what we had, it's not about Obama. We could do better, but Pelosi and these people would not come out
Mhm.
and stand for universal health care. Pelosi attacked AOC, saying basically, who are you? Stay in your lane. Pelosi opened up the door for Jeffries, not for Barbara Lee. She did give a nod to Barbara Lee by creating a whole new post in the Democratic hierarchy, which was more pro
after
forma,
after she
more
shut
pro.
the door
Yeah,
on
after she shut the door on her, was more pro forma than anything else. Um, we don't have an analog to the Heritage Foundation that is thinking seriously about all of the dimensions of state power. I'm a former chair of the board of the Institute for Policy Studies.
Mhm.
If they hear this, some of them may take issue, but let them take issue. They're the nicest people, and they have
Mhm.
worked very closely with your father over the years. I've
Mhm.
been on that board 20 some years. I chaired that board for 7 years or so. That is not a think tank about taking state power. It is very important in sectoral elements, like about the oligarchs, or Phyllis Bennett's work on Israel and the Palestinians, or some people's work on other issues. But we need some think tanks that are systemic about how the way the country operates, how it might operate. We also need, and the Progressive Caucus, how it has the name progressive, but it goes in many directions. They don't really share a disciplined orientation. They're not really supportive of the squad in the way, and the squad is a common outlook. Bernie Sanders, uh, who got millions and millions of votes, stopped by Clyburn in South Carolina. Um, so we need people who we need an analog in our organization who's looking at nurturing judges in state arenas as well as the federal arena. We don't have that. The Center for whatever it is in Black, it's something in Washington, D.C., is more concerned about how many people of color are being hired both in the House and the Senate, irrespective of what the ideological background of the congressional people are. That's an old civil rights measure, which was very unimportant. The question now is, what do they think? Any Black woman will do for president? No. What does she think? Not as just simply as a woman, but what is her view on state power for the entire nation? So we have to step up with a new narrative of organization and
Mhm.
preparedness, uh, and not get confused. Let me just stop on this point because one of the things we're seeing the affordability narrative now being co-opted, both by centrist Democrats. The woman who was elected governor in Virginia
Yes.
does not have the same outlook
Mhm.
as Mandami. That is not, now that's not to put her down, but let's not confuse that somehow that there is a direct correlation between what we saw with Mandami or what we're seeing with these democratic socialists out in Seattle and Michigan and other places of the platforms. It's not their nomenclature of being democratic socialists, because ERMR and other people share those same outlooks and principles, but are not members of the Democratic Socialists of America. In fact, the organization of the Democratic Socialists of America has some ultra left pull in its central group who, because they disagree with AOC on this or that factor, basically expelled her. Uh, so we need a whole new construction of how we organize and prepare the next generation, not just electing and saying what we need is a numerical majority in the House. We do need a numerical majority in the House, but let's not be fooled that a numerical majority in the House is the answer to fighting against the MAGA orientation. I want to stress that because if Donald Trump is out tomorrow or whatever happens to him, MAGA is still there. That is inserted in state governments, local governments, in the judicial, in the Supreme Court. They will look for a more predictable and reliable uh, person in the White House, woman or man. But this is not just the Trump show. And we focus too much solely on him and miss that we need to demand that the Progressive Caucus actually have a 20-year strategy,
Mhm.
organized, state, local, not just funding these lobbyists. $1.5 billion in 7 months was spent on the Harris campaign. And where did that $1.5 billion go? To lobbyists who are messaging. We don't just messaging about what? This is not about personality or articulation. Those things are very important, but this is about governance policy. And so that's where I think we have to take this moment, this really positive moment of seeing somewhat of a shift, a kind of stream with new, younger people with a different humanistic view who are not just speaking truth to power, but who are trying to become the power. That's got to be our concept. And for Black people in particular, we have over romanticized speaking truth to power. Jesse Jackson was not just speaking truth to power. He was not trying to become the power in of himself. He was trying to bring the rainbow to power. He was trying to be the sharp edge of a broader social movement called the Rainbow Coalition, not just I am president. And we've had people, and I almost want to name call now, but I won't, who just want to be I am president
Hmm.
rather than we are moving into governance. The Rainbow Coalition was a we construct, not an I construct. We can look at any number of these other progressive movements. Some who became president, it was about I, the first. No, if Jesse Jackson had won, it would have been we the first. We would have never seen anything in governance power here in the United States like we would have seen with the Rainbow Coalition. It was the really emphasis was on the coalition, not on the leader. Martin Luther King was not an I person.
Hmm.
He did say, I've seen the promised land, but he's saying, you're going to get there.
I
I
might not.
won't be I won't be with you all plural. It's not about I being there. It's about you getting there. And he was called by the people. He didn't go and say, I'm going to start a new organization. They said, hey, we got an organization and we need somebody with your talents. That's why they brought him down to Birmingham. Was it Montgomery? To do the
Montgomery.
first organization. Yeah.
When he was doing his church, he was finishing up his PhD.
Yeah,
He got
he was about,
pulled in.
become a big time
Mhm.
minister, big time
Yeah.
pulpit. He would have been running the same social constructs, but it would have been in one church rather than horizontal social king.
Mhm.
He would have been the more vertical king that my alma mater, Morehouse, likes to talk to him about as the individual rather than as the social individual. We like to talk about Jesse Jackson, the extraordinary, handsome brother, articulate, so forth and so on, rather than the social construct. And uh, I know our time is running, and I do hope that people are paying attention to what's happening in Venezuela and to realize that these several thousand to perhaps 12,000 troops are sent on the Barlovento coast, which is where the largest concentration of Black people in Venezuela live, who came out of the Congo and what is today Angola, from the Kingdom of the Congo and from the Luango Kingdom, who came there, were enslaved there, the cocoa industry there. So they are on the front line. If that land is penetrated on the coast, if boots are on the ground, or if missiles or drones or whatever, it's Black people on that coast who are the
Mhm.
front line of that. And for the African American community, we need to be aware of that and to speak to our congressional people. They need to speak up about this. Where is Congressman Meeks, who is the minority head of Foreign Affairs? I know we all have our hands full with a lot of stuff, but we need that voice stepping forward. And we need more than, but the president doesn't have authorization from Congress to go to war. That's the procedural point that they like to point at. We need to stand forth and say, no war. We stand against this war. And we need to say to Black soldiers, if you go in there, you're killing other Black people. And that's
Mhm.
unacceptable. And to see who stands, I mean, we talk about, race first and so forth and so on. Then we need to show that in our practice. So I hope people are paying attention. We're at a dangerous moment. The world, particularly in Latin America and the Caribbean, has stood forth, calling this as a zone of peace. The CARICOM countries, Mia Moore from Barbados, David Kamasong, the representative for the CARICOM countries, who is also Barbadian, the Cubans, Lula in Brazil,
Mhm.
Petro in Colombia, Guterres in Chile. They are all saying, if you start something here, it's going to be regional. It's going to be devastating to all of
Mhm.
us. And the European Union has stopped giving intelligence to the U.S. About drugs because they said you're a rogue nation in effect. That's not their term, my term,
Mhm.
but you're outside of international law. And I think that has forced Trump to at least say publicly that he might sit down and talk to Maduro.
Mhm.
Machado the tragic, ironic recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, was flown out of the country 2 days ago. I got a call from someone in Venezuela to inform me of that. That's not a good sign, although it may be balanced off by the U.S. Representatives there and the embassy have not been flown out. So we may be at a tactical moment that's important to try to stretch into a larger moment where they are feeling the pressure. Rubio is pushing very hard, as a lot of Republicans, to including one I saw on television this morning. I'm trying to think of his name that Trump now has in court. A right-wing Democrat who are all calling for the overthrow of Maduro. But I think people are recognizing that this is more than a notion. I heard a former admiral on television this morning say, that Venezuela is the size of California, or two Californias, and there are not enough troops now mounted to go in there. And if you go in, the question is how you get out. And but people need to speak up on this. This is a really critical moment. And we need the Black Caucus in particular, along with the Latino caucus standing forth on this, and the Progressive caucus standing up on this.
Well, I want you to come back and talk about that because I don't think that we understand Venezuela and South and Central America and the Black presence there, the progressive presence there, the indigenous presence there. I mean, because
Yeah.
they have the understanding that they are indigenous people who speak Spanish.
Yes.
Farther
And
north,
Reverend Jesse Jackson's history
yeah, yeah.
there. I was just looking at something earlier of him playing the drums in Barlovento in
Oh
2005
yes. Well,
and
he.
going
Oh no, please.
to these cacao cooperatives that Chavez had set up. And when Pat Robinson, the late Pat Robinson, Christian Pat Robinson, called for the assassination of Hugo Chavez, it was Jesse Jackson who stood forth and said, "No, no, wait a minute," and pushed back on this.
Mhm.
And this is something else that we need to look at. I'm going to in the next day or so see if there are photographs that I can get a hold of from the places in Barlovento that Reverend Jackson went to, including Cabaya, which is thought to be the true birthplace of the liberator Simon Bolivar. Reverend Jackson went to a number of townships within the state of Miranda, which is where Barlovento on the east coast, the Caribbean coast, not far from Trinidad, stands. We also need to petition the Trinidadian government to
Mhm.
back off in its complicity of housing and complimenting. They're going on maneuvers with the U.S. government, and the prime minister there has been very rabid and right wing about.
What is
Uh,
going on with that?
well, this again is they have large amounts of oil in Trinidad, and Chevron and other corporate entities are interested in that. And of course, Venezuela has the largest oil reserve known in the world, and that really is the ultimate goal of going into Venezuela and trying to overthrow Maduro, the President Nicolas Maduro, who has a $50 million bounty on his head from the U.S. government. That's a bounty of $50 million from the U.S. government. So this is a tinderbox that could go the wrong way in any minute. Already several million or more Venezuelans have left the country, mostly because of economic issues, flooding other areas of Latin America. If intervention, military intervention goes on, it's going to also end up in Colombia, where you have an
Mhm.
active 75-year-old guerrilla operation still going on who work
Mhm.
both sides of that border, in addition to narco traficantes and all. It will affect the entire region, and we'll see masses of people flowing towards the U.S. border. And it will put a lot of pressure on these other governments, and they don't want that. And so we have Lula in Brazil and all of these people now calling to recognize that area as a zone of peace, and the Venezuelans will resolve. They have a lot of internal issues. This is about
Mhm.
protecting their sovereignty and their independence and their right to make their own determinations. It is not about per se support of the presidency of Nicolas Maduro, whom I know personally and spent a lot of time around him. And but this is about national sovereignty. It's not about individual, as it would have been against Hugo Chavez, uh, as much as some of us liked him and the personality that he was. It was always about the sovereignty and independence and
Mhm.
self-determination of the country, which is its citizenry, not the personality who is its president.
I always love speaking with you. Learned so much, James Early. And I want you to get well, get better, because you've got to come back and lay out Venezuela, because they are really ratcheting up the aggression there.
Yes, yes.
And Dr. King said that one day our hubris would get us in trouble. That we would go up against a country, some little country, and we would know their name,
And
and
he
they
mentioned Venezuela, by the way. Dr. King did.
absolutely,
I
and
think it may have been in the World House speech. I can't recall
that it
exactly right
was the
now.
World House. It was the World
Yes,
House speech.
yes, yes, yes.
And I think we have to be mindful of the fact that people. People have grown. I'm not saying grown up. We have grown. People know that they are somebody. They do. They
Yes,
they know
yes.
that they have the right to their own country.
Right. And the
They
8 million or so volunteers, this is outside of the organized military, who are daily practicing with rifles and swinging ropes across streams and whatnot. They are not going to stand by and just let someone walk into their country. This will start a real civil war, which will spread
Mhm.
really across the region. Lavrov from
Russia.
Russia, Putin's foreign minister. I don't have any book for Putin, but I do look at realpolitik and see, what the correlation of forces are. Have sent some kind of weapons there that can bring down helicopters and hit boats and whatnot, and they're saying don't tread on Venezuela. The Chinese foreign ministry has also spoken out, saying that this would be a real mistake. And so the world is standing forth to say that let diplomacy be the load beam of and compromises will have to be made. This is not an either or situation. And the first compromise, the most important compromise, has to be made in Venezuela among the Venezuelans, not between the Venezuelan government and foreign governments, but among the Venezuelans themselves. And so that it is through diplomacy, which the U.S. on both sides of the aisle so often does not utilize fully. Diplomacy, if leveraged properly, might have stopped the illegal and deadly invasion of Russia into Ukraine. Diplomacy is being misused in the case of the Palestinians, saying that there is a ceasefire when there is not a ceasefire. It's gone back to sort of the normative day-to-day killing and the expansion of the Israeli military into other countries and the dispersal of Palestinians and the taking of land of the Palestinians. We're seeing all of the lies come out, and this is both on, the Biden-Harris administration and on, I won't say the Trump-Vance administration, because we don't know that Vance has any
Mhm.
real,
Oh no,
real
he has
role
Bill
here.
Trump, because that's Peter Thiel. He's his.
Oh,
You
Peter
know,
Thiel.
yes, and Elon Musk. I mean, he's their guy, right?
Yep,
And so
yep,
you
yep.
know, I want you to come back and talk about that, because Venezuela is not just Venezuela. It is Russia. It is China. It is a global conflict in the Americas. See,
Right.
we've seen
Well,
it
let's
in
look
Europe.
forward to that. I'm going off to Togo the first week of December for a Pan-African something or another. I have to go back and look at the invite. But Togo played a very important role in the meeting last December in Cuba, which was a commemoration of the United Nations first decade on Afro descendants, in which
Mhm.
a number of representatives from the United Nations were present, and particularly UNESCO. And so maybe I can bring back some insight from that. And recently, just for the listening audience, the United States has once again left UNESCO, as I think the first break was when Mwalimu Julius Nyerere was
Mhm.
calling for a new world order, saying
Yeah.
that the media was bombarding Africa and Africa had no control of what kind of information was coming in. And the United States and the United Kingdom left UNESCO at that point. The United States has left UNESCO again over the Palestinian question,
Mhm.
and but Ghana has been given a charge by the African Union, a 10-year charge, I understand, to focus on issues of reparations on the continent.
Mhm.
Ghana is one of those countries where dual citizenship of African descendants is being offered. I don't want to make that sound too facile because I don't know the details. I don't think you could just show up and say, I'm here to get my citizenship.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure it's a lot more complex than that. But these are developments that are going on that in mass media we'd hear nothing about. And our representatives are not tuned in, particularly at the congressional level. We need people who are looking. We talk a lot about Africa and being Africans and African descendants and the diaspora and reparations, but we don't keep an organized governance representation that
Mhm.
follows and engages that in the way that could inform our citizenship and our leverage and our discussion with our fellow Americans about what their objective interest in this should be. So I look forward to coming back, perhaps to bring some of that information.
I cannot wait. I cannot wait. But I'm going to keep an eye on Venezuela and be in touch with you over the next few days.
Very
Uh,
good. I will be looking
and
at that.
absolutely, because it's growing, it's changing. We love you, James Early, and wish you Godspeed and great health.
And thank you, and a big embrace to the Reverend.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Praise the
you.
Lord, he's getting better all the time. Coming
Very
up,
good.
everybody, we're going to talk with Dr. Julianne Malveaux about the Black Friday bust. That's right. You miss one check, you have a challenge. You miss two paychecks, you have to start borrowing money. You might have had to do it on the first one. But now the shelves are full. People are not buying, or maybe they cannot buy, or maybe it's a little bit of both. Let's talk about how people are dealing with this financial crunch that so many of us are finding ourselves in. The Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.